Welcome to the Localization Fireside Chat. I'm Robin Ayub, your host. Join me for captivating conversations with industry leaders exploring localization, translation, and global communication. Ignite your curiosity as we expand your horizons through these conversations. So let's dive in together into the Localization Fireside Chat.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Localization Fireside channel in YouTube and podcast. We exist on all your favorite channels for those who would like to watch or for those who would like to listen to our episodes and to our conversations. Today is Friday, November 24th, 2023, and I'm honored to be joined by Bruno Herman. Bruno is in Brussels, and I look forward to our conversation today, Bruno. And it's been long coming. We've talked quite often, you and I, over the past. We've met recently, but we've been talking on various occasions in a variety of settings together. And I can't wait to dive into our today's topic. It's, as usual, our conversation are pretty unscripted and off the cuff, natural, and that's what I like them to be. No pressure, no need for any PowerPoint discussions, tools, or anything like this. So today's conversation is pretty interesting for our audience. For those who don't know Bruno, and I'll let him introduce himself in more details. I don't want to steal his thunder, but in essence, the theme of the conversation today is where you have an individual who worked extensively as a buyer of localization, as a customer, and today, and on both sides actually, and also on the supplier side. So he understands the buying part, and he also understands extensively the selling part. And in today's world, we need those types of opinions from both sides of the equation. So Bruno, again, welcome to the channel. Welcome to today's episode. I really appreciate you having you with us today. And if you don't mind, for the audience, introducing yourself, Bruno, in your own word.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Robin. It's a pleasure to have this conversation on Friday afternoon for me. Perfect way to end the week. And as you said, I've been around in this industry for quite a long time now, 30 years. 30 years this year. And I've been working, I started actually on the supplier side as a linguist and as a project manager myself. And then after a few years, I moved to the client side or the buyer side of the industry, working for some big multinationals in the technology, market research, and life science industries. And indeed, I'm probably a bit special as a buyer, because when I was working on the buyer side, what some people call the buyer side, I was actually juggling the buyer and the supplier sides. It means that I was officially working in a company buying localization services, but at the same time, that company was also selling localization services. So my teams were doing both, which was very exciting, I have to say, and very unusual. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, probably not, but I know people usually are on one side or the other, but actually I was on both. So it made me have a good, I would say, overview of the industry. And also it explains why today I'm a consultant working with some organizations, small organizations, startups, but also some multinationals, because first of all, I understand both sides. And also I've been always trying the best I could to make those two sides work together. Because I know sometimes there is a feeling of a lack of alignment between the suppliers and the buyers. And so some suppliers are saying that, they don't win business from their buyers because, they didn't understand something. And on the buyer side, they said that they cannot find the right supplier because those suppliers are not understanding their business issues. So I'm trying to really make those two words understand each other and also work together. So that's why today I'm an executive advisor and a strategic consultant. Executive because localization needs to be at the executive level, and strategic because content operations are very strategic. So yeah, I put those two words in my title.
Absolutely. So let me unpack, if you don't mind, some of the items that you've mentioned in your introduction. Short questions. Are you independent? Do you work for somebody else? How does that work for you?
So right now I'm independent. So I'm working, as a consultant in different capacities. There are engagements regarding audits, there are engagements regarding actually decision making services. So just to help people improve their operations or organizations or improve. So I'm working with organizations which are either global already or that are already globalizing themselves. And so it means that I'm working with executives, C-level usually, or just below the C-level, to make sure that they understand the strategic nature of content operations and specifically the strategic nature of localization. So, but I'm seen as an independent, so I'm not tied to any organization.
And you work on the buyer side and the supplier side still, right?
That is correct, Seth. Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned something very interesting, which is I've not because, I always struggled with that, is because when you say, having executive discussions with the buyer side regarding localization or translation, however you want to call it, I always found, yes, there are willingness to understand, there are willingness to have a conversation, but the attention span for localization is short at that level. And depending on the size of the organization. I'm not saying that to be negative, not at all. Everybody's got their priorities, everybody's got their list of things that they need to worry about. And I would assume, based on some conversation that I've had in the past, I can't wait to hear your feedback, is that localization sits somewhere toward the bottom of priorities. If you were a large pharmaceutical company, right? Or if you were a large industrial firm. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting to hear from you. So how do you take this from being at the lower side of things from a priority for an executive to elevate it to the top of their food chain, if you will?
That's a great question. And that's my daily bread, as you just mentioned. I think, this sort of picture that you just described is coming from what I called in my introduction a lack of alignment between suppliers and buyers. Indeed, if you are a buyer, if you are an LSP today, and if you want to sort of win some business with an organization, regardless of the size, can be a startup or a multinational, when you are going to present your offering, you are going to present you are going to introduce your services, what you can do with your people, with your technology, etc. And actually, many buyers, if not most buyers, actually will see that as one of the other commodities that they have to buy. And obviously, some of these buyers are procurement people or middle managers, and they see that as one of the pieces of their puzzle. And they don't elevate localization to the strategic level, because the strategic level is translation localization, or has to see translation localization in a very different way, which is what I said before, strategic way, which is not just something to indeed transaction some files between a supplier and buyer. I sent you 10 files, you send me 10 files back in German, French, and Spanish, which is what I call the commodity or the very transactional way. The strategic way of considering translation localization is to insert them, is to embed. I use the word embed them in the supply chain. That is a strategic asset in any company. Translation localization alone are not going to be strategic enough. If you embed translation localization in a content supply chain of any organization, because all organizations have at least one supply chain of content, right? Creation to delivery. There are a number of steps, including translation localization, but in addition to UX, in addition to testing, in addition to design, so you have a number of roles and responsibilities in this supply chain. But if you elevate translation localization from the commodity level to the strategic level, that has to be the content supply chain, then of course the C-level gets the point that if you don't embed those two things called translation localization in their supply chain, the business is not going to happen. And obviously that is the strategic way of looking at it. But unfortunately, I have to say that in my career, I've not heard so many LSPs considering this strategic approach for translation localization, not just because they were not talking to the C-level, but because simply they were not using the language of the company.
So do you connect the dots between the total spend for a large organization on an item like translation versus buying real estate or buying any other types of ingredients for their business, whereby, localization, as everybody knows, sits at the bottom of that spend list for any organization. Is that connected in any way to what you just mentioned earlier from a strategic level elevation?
Yes, exactly. It's in many cases, translation localization are in a bucket with indeed real estate or procurement services or finance, financial services, leasing, etc., etc. So it is in this bucket, in this big bag, which is always called procurement most of the time. I mean, it's not always, but most of the time. And indeed, to take this out, just to take translation localization out of the bag and elevate those activities to the strategic level, it takes sometimes more than just the embedding in the content supply chain so that the C-level understands what translation localization is. But the next step, which is probably equally challenging, is to make the C-level understand that translation localization are creating value, are driving profits. Let's put it that way. Because obviously, some people, even some C-level people, might still see translation localization as an important part of any content supply chain, but they don't see the value immediately. They don't make the connection between the international business and translation localization. So one of the tips I usually give to people who have to do this sort of exercise to present or to introduce translation localization as value creating assets is to present to C-level, to a bid defense or to a C-level meeting, translation localization in three different ways: the right way of doing it, the bad way of doing it, and not doing it.
That's right.
So that the C-level has a choice. They have a choice to make between including and considering translation localization in the right way, which is creating value, or considering translation localization in a bad way, which is at the level of commodity, or not considering translation localization at all, because there are some C-level people who are really questioning the need for that. Believe it or not, it's still happening today. So by just putting the contrast between the three ways of considering translation localization, it usually unlocks a lot of conversation.
So the question becomes now, if I was a CEO or if I was a C-level for one of those organizations, my immediate question would be what is the impact on my business? And this is not an emotional answer, and it's not an emotional question. It's a more of a logical question. What is the impact on my business? What's the outcome, a positive outcome that localization creates in my business? And I just want to ask you this question. I mean, it's an open-ended question, and we both can theorize in terms of how we come up to an answer. But I'm interested in your reaction to this. Is have we done a good enough job as an industry in articulating the business outcome from using translation services or localization services for those large organizations? Example, company A, large organization, global organization, buying localization services will cause X, whatever that X is, into your financials. And now I'm a CEO of a company and I'm paying attention now, because now it affects my business, affects my results, affects my share price. My stockholders are going to pay attention to this. And now it's part of the business equation versus, emotionally speaking, you need to translate to sub-Saharan languages because your product is going there and these people need to understand what they're buying. That's what the localization industry, in my opinion, has been pegging that entire sales approach on. Demographic connections, interconnectivity between people don't speak the language that they need to consume products and services, which in theory they need to understand which is fine. But as a CEO now, the audience has changed. As a CEO, I need to understand it from numbers, positive impact on my business, and how does it solve my business problems? And I don't know if we've done enough job articulating that business side of it. I'm waiting for your feedback on this.
I share your view. I think this industry hasn't done enough. It has done some things, sometimes some very good things, but not enough, never enough. And I would say it starts with something quite simple. I'm going to be a bit provocative here, Robin, and say, well, I invited, I don't know how many LSPs when I was on the buyer, when I had my buyer hat, and just to come to my company and, tell me how we could do together, how we could work together. And in 95% of cases, and I'm not exaggerating, it's really 95% of cases, those companies, those LSPs were coming and they were immediately starting by, during 20, 25 minutes, telling me what they were doing. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I can help you with it, I can help you with that. But they never asked me one simple question. How can I help you up front, even upstream, even before coming to the meeting? That would have been the question that I would have expected. Say, Bruno, in light of our meeting, can you tell me what are your issues today? What is
Yep.
what is the reason why? What is the value that we can create?
Absolutely.
They were
What is the
coming
problem?
immediately.
What is the problem, and what is it that I'm trying to solve for
Yes,
you? And we
exactly.
lack that.
Exactly. So that's a simple thing to actually walk in the shoes of a customer, is to say, if I'm going to meet a customer or a potential customer for the first time,
Hmm.
I just need to understand what this customer is doing, a bit
Correct.
like a recruitment process. If you don't
Yep.
go to an interview without knowing who you are going
Hmm.
to talk to, you are going to miss the interview, right? That's just impossible. So I would say that's the first issue. The second issue is that if some companies are successful in walking in the shoes of a customer, so let's assume that, I'm having an LSP that has convinced the client that there is an opportunity, there is a business opportunity for the both of us. There is still another issue that is coming up later, which is, to your point, which is to demonstrate the value. And it's not always the demonstration of the value itself, because sometimes there is a customer, there is a buyer who is going to say, yes, I do need my product to be localized. Otherwise, my product is not going to be launched in that market, and even more in regulated industries where it's mandatory. So there is no hesitation. It has to be done. There is no choice. But the challenge to demonstrate the value is how to measure it, how to capture it. Because it's not just a matter of, if my product is not localized, it's not going to be launched in that market. It is, if it's localized, how can I make sure that it's still creating value? Because it's not because I'm launching a product in France or in Germany in the right language that it's going to create value automatically. It's going to be on the marketplace, but there will be other products. My competitors will be on the same market. So how can I measure the value for me as a business, not just for me as a producer or as a creator of products, and then that's where it comes. It's a mix of sales and marketing effectiveness numbers, like sales, like engagements, like number of calls to call centers, etc. And then the other part of the mix is what I call, well, it's not just me, but what is called usually experiential metrics. What is the actual customer experience? Is it good? Is it bad? How is it different versus my competitors? So you have a whole list of KPIs, and these KPIs should not be discussed at the end. They should be discussed in the beginning of the conversation, because as soon as there is an agreement between a supplier and a buyer, the supplier should be proactive and say how we are going to measure our success, and
That's
not
right.
wait until the work is done to start saying, oh, and by the way, now how should we measure the success?
But there's a disconnect between the buyer obligated to translate because it's it's the law, it is by obligation, or which takes a different approach on how you approach the whole thing. And the second thing is I'm translating or I'm localizing because of commercial reasons, revenue increase, as you said, customer sats, customer experience, all that stuff can be measured. And
Yeah.
as we describe this topic, I can't help to not notice that there is perhaps a room for, and you and I participated in a knowledge-based panel that we've discussed together on a different episode on this channel, where, for instance, the learning industry, after we put together a learning curriculum or content or whatever you want to call it, there is level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 measurements of the performance of that learning module that we've launched. And I'm so surprised till now, it's very rudimentary how we measure the localization output. We measure it by quality, and the quality is measured by various ways. Is the customer satisfied with it? The user satisfied with it? Yeah, that's good enough for the localization firm in a lot of cases, right? But how did we achieve the outcome? And there's a lot of people talking now about, I'd like to get your take on that one, on content performance measurement.
Mhm.
So after I localized something, there is ways now to measure the performance of this content. Did it achieve what it's supposed to achieve? Now, I'm not talking about all content. If you're just translating a user manual to put on a shelf somewhere because the law has, obligated you to do that, that's different than marketing material. Did I generate enough leads off of my website? Did I resolve enough customer issues using the localization tools, etc.? What's your thoughts on that content performance, if you will?
That's another very, very good question. First of all, years ago, I stopped using the word quality. And I even stopped using the word performance. It sounds provocative, but the reason is because I found a much better word to describe and to define what should be measured. This is called effectiveness. I called content effectiveness measurement. Why effectiveness? Because for me, and it's not just for me, I think if you ask people, you translate content, you localize a product, it means that this content, this product has a job to do, which is to be sold. Simple as that, right?
That's right.
That's the job of the content. It's not, as you said, you don't translate, well, in some cases you do, but usually you don't translate a user guide to be put on a shelf and not to be used by anyone. Mm-hmm. Usually when you localize content, when you localize product, when you localize services, it is because it's going to be a sale. Well, multiple sales, hopefully. Mm-hmm. So I think that effectiveness is because translation have a job to do. And the job is to indeed create, well, first of all, is to make an impression, is to make, an impact, and it's to make an imprint. That's the marketing concept of, the sales journey. Is first to reach out, and then to convince, to resonate, and finally to create a reaction. And I think that's the job of the content that is localized. So based on this sort of sales journey or sales, it's easier to start looking at the steps, as I said, between, impression, impact, and imprint, and say, okay, what are the KPIs at each stage? What should we do? Because to your point, you don't translate a user guide for the same reason as you localize a product. You translate a sales guide because you hope that obviously it's going to be used with a product and by the users of that product, but you localize the product because that's going to generate the sale. That's going to generate the actual reaction of the sale. So that might be different between translating a KPI, translating a manual, and localizing a product, because the objective is going to be quite different in the curve or in the cycle. So I would say that what is lacking for me sometimes, and that's what I'm happy to help clients with that now, is to define in their supply chain, in their customer journey, where the KPIs for translation localization will make the most impact. Because indeed, it cannot just be, the number of sales. Number of sales is great, but of course, in many markets, there is a lot of competition. So why should my product, which is localized, why should it be better? Why should it be more impactful than my competitors? And the difference between, you made a very good point about, the sort of mindset between organizations having to translate, like regulated industries, like life science, finance, legal, and the other industries that are not forced, but they are forced by their clients, actually, because, I always remember that sentence that I heard in my business school, which is that, some people need low prices, but some people prefer low prices. And it means that even if you are rich, you would prefer low prices because you keep some money in your pocket. So I would say that even if you don't need to translate, if you don't need to localize, there will still be a competitive advantage, because people will prefer your product that is in Germany, rather than to the product. I mean, instead of the product of your competitor that is going to be in bad German or in no German. And that's the difference. That's the contrast between, as I said, the contrast between right, wrong, and no localization.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that, in a diverse industry as we are, and what I mean by diverse is we cover many topics of localization and every topic under the sun, basically. And at the same time, when we're talking about measurement, you're talking about something specific. When, anything that has to do with measurement, it has to be specific. It has to be scientific. It has to lead to some better outcome of improving the process, improving. So I'm feeling here that there is an idea that you and I just came up with today on this episode of an ISO standard, perhaps down the road, to detail or to work around how do we measure outcome. And because we have a lot of quality standards on, the number of errors per thousand, et cetera. So the error, and you mentioned the quality issues, the quality in terms of, we're going to stop talking about quality and figuring out, did the content achieve what it's supposed to achieve? And that's a shift. That's a major shift. And you and I were being like, if somebody from our ISO standard listens to this conversation today, they probably put us on the, big list here, but we apologize ahead of time if we're really thinking outside the box a little bit here by saying maybe the measurement needs to be around what is the content doing after it has been translated. Is it improving things or not improving things? And I'm sure there's many ways to measure that.
Absolutely. And effectiveness should be really, deserves for me an ISO standard. It's been in my dreams or my hopes for quite some time that, in terms of certification, and that's the case in other industries, Robin, that's the trick here. There are other industries where you have other ISO standards which are effectiveness oriented, but not in the localization industry. Very strange, very strange.
And if we go back to, I've, similar to you, I've been around for many years. I just celebrated my 20th year in the anniversary in the industry. And, every conversation I've had is around quality, has been centered around, is this word accurate or not accurate? I prefer different words. The translation generally is correct, but people have different ways of reading certain things and deeming that it's good for them or not good for them. So equality has always been, in my opinion, an elusive thing.
Yeah.
To most part. I'm sure there are some people going to be disagreeing with me and say, no, equality could be more centered and could be more concrete when it comes to certain things. I get that. But there are people I've been given this example a long time ago. You take a paragraph, you give it to 5 people in the same room, you tell them to read it, and the 5 people will have 5 different opinions on the same text. So there is room for challenging things. However, if we measure things from an outcome perspective, now it's solid. Now it's math. Now it's, did it achieve what it's supposed to achieve, regardless of how did we get there?
Yeah, exactly. And to be really honest, the reason why I stopped using quality as a word itself is because you can ask quality in a room with 10 people, you will have at least 8 different opinions. And these opinions will be subjective. That's the nature. That's the human nature, right?
Right.
You ask people what they like, what they don't like. They will not express why they like it or why they don't like it. They will just say, yes, I like, or no, I like, I don't. So I think that effectiveness is pushing people to say, if you tell me this is right or this is wrong, you have to tell me why. You have to tell me what is really underlying your opinion or your perspective on my content, on my product, and not just say, yeah, because otherwise I'm going to be lost, translation for that matter. I'm going to be lost and I'm not going to know what to do.
That's right. Now, switching gear a little bit, just for the sake of time, there's many topics I would like to cover with you today, Bruno. One of the things I think you and I have had a conversation and we've talked a little bit about and resourcing things in the new environment that we're in right now. As you and I have talked before, there is a mega shift happening, not just in our industry, but in a variety of industries when it comes to artificial intelligence and the impact of the artificial intelligence on many industries, including localization. We're not being singled out for the audience. Localization is not the only industry being affected by artificial intelligence. All industries are being affected by artificial intelligence. Now, for our industry, and the question to you, Bruno, is how do we coexist as human resources, talents, skills, businesses in the new technologies and how the new technology is being implemented and adopted into our industry. And you and I have talked about this before, and there's various ways of dealing with this. I'm interested in your opinion for our audience. How do we deal with this?
Yes, that's a huge topic, and usually what I do when I have to explain my perspective on that, which is not just mine, by the way, but which is one of the perspectives on this, is to start with the big picture. And you set the stage in the beginning of this call, right? You said that AI is changing many things, and probably will change everything at some point. But today it's already changing many things. And what AI is really changing in our industry is, of course, that it is creating a lot of changes because AI works different way than human beings. And I would say that it has the first ripple effect of this difference is on operations. Because AI doesn't work like we've been working in this industry for decades with the transaction of files. You can have 1 million great files. You are not going to have any AI just by trying to push those files or to feed those files to AI. It's not going to work. AI works with data. You aren't going to say, yes, but Bruno, data is not new, right? Data has been around in our industry for a while. Yeah, but not for the same reason as AI. Data has been used, and when I was working at Nielsen, I was already managing, 15 years ago, I was already managing language data. But it was not for AI, it was for BI. It was actually for business
intelligence.
Because, yeah, it was, all the millions of data labels that Nielsen had to be translated and localized. And at that time, I was saying to my friends in the industry, you know what, my team is managing language data. They were asking me, language data, what is this? So they were looking at me as a bit of E.T., the movie. And then they said, oh, interesting, but Bruno is really living in the future. And I said, one day you will see that language data is going to be used for something else than BI. And today, just one letter has been changed. Instead of B, you have the A coming up. AI needs language data, but for another reason, which is even more vital, that you don't have any AI without data. And language data is key to feed and to train AI. Having said that, you would say, yeah, but today in our industry, we're still working a lot with files, Word, PDF, and, there is nothing wrong about that. But the one thing that is wrong is that it's not going to help to feed any AI. So you need to convert a number of files into language data. I'm not going to enter into that because that would take 1 hour to explain and to say where I see some challenges, but a lot of opportunities for the industry. So I know some people know I love this topic because I think this industry has a huge opportunity in terms of conversion of files into data, but I put that aside now. But it's changing operations because you cannot just keep, if you are a supplier or even if you are a buyer, you cannot just keep working on your multilingual content by transactioning files. You cannot say if you are a buyer, you cannot say to your supplier, I'm going to send you 10 PDF, can you send them back to me in 5 languages? And then the supplier will get the files and the supplier will say, the project manager is going to send those files to the linguist, to the DTP specialist, etc. So everything is based on transactional files when you look at the workflows. That is changing because AI pushes for changing that. And instead of working with file transactions, you now, as a buyer or as a supplier, you have to work with data flows. Replace file transactions with data flows, which means that, of course, as I said, first of all, you need to have this data. You need to get this data, extract this data from files, but that's not enough. You need to make sure that this data is going to be relevant and usable for AI. So there are a number of tasks, new roles, responsibilities that can be really in the hands of the language industry, like data curation, data structure, data management. And there is an opportunity, I would say, even to go beyond the industry, to work with another industry, which is critical in AI, which is data science. I see a lot of opportunities in the collaboration between data scientists and linguists, because I think data scientists have a lot of experience and expertise in data management, and linguists have a lot of expertise in language management. If you put those together, that's the winning combination for making AI truly multilingual today. So that is changing operations. And then, as I said, the last ripple effect of the big picture that I described in the beginning is that you have a change in roles and responsibilities, which means that there are some new resources needed. So there will be for some time, maybe for another couple of years, there will be a need for post editors and translators, but then there will be a growing need for data taggers, data annotators, data curators. And these can be very nice roles, value-adding roles for linguists. Some of them will want to get there. Some of them will not want to get there just because, like for post editing, some people wanted to become post editors. Some people didn't want to become post editors. So there will be a choice to make. But as a leader in the organization, in operations, for instance, the challenge will be to have the right people with the right tasks. And that will mean, of course, to recycle some people, but also to have to recruit some new people. So so the ripple effect, starting with AI, the first ripple effect on operations, and as a result, the second ripple effect on resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you bring up a very good point in terms of how we, as an industry, absorb this technology and work with this technology and how it evolves on an individual basis, on a business level basis, on our customers' levels, etc. So there are still, as we cross the bridge of ingesting this technology into our world, there are so many obstacles that we still need to solve that hasn't been solved yet. And one of them comes to mind is the idea of integrating all these repositories of data and making sense of all these streams of data to a unified way that a localization firm can make sense of it all. As you know, there's maybe 13,000 content management systems out there. Each one of them has its own protocol. Each one of them has its own set of, criteria of how you parse data to it, etc. So data topic is pretty interesting, and I love talking about data. Part of my world back in the days, I was working with data in one of my career. I was a DBA for another company. So it's very interesting, passionate topic to be talking about. But having said all this, to make sense of all this data and all this technology and all the roles changing, etc., do you feel like, I feel it in my mind, our psyche as an industry, we are torn between two, I want to say, polar opposites. One is one large population of our industry still want to, avoid what they call the nightmare of technology coming in, and the other, more of avant-garde, if you will, portion or part of our industry from a population perspective are embracing it, are running toward it. They want to bring it in and they want to work with it, play with it, and see what it does and what can we do with it. So who wins at the end? I was reminded at the end of, there was a conference not too long ago, I won't name any names here, where it was attended by a large population of translators, and the speaker mentioned something about, don't worry, AI is not going to do anything, and you guys are going to be doing very well, don't worry. And the applause in the audience was so big, but I don't know if they're delaying the inevitable. And do you agree with my analogy on the two psyche of the industry going on?
I do. I really do. I absolutely do. I think that you're absolutely right that there is right now, because we are in the beginning of the journey with AI, right? We see every day that AI is not perfect yet. And, there are some new versions of ChatGPT, and the AI world is really bubbling at the moment. It's really, there are some things really moving fast. There are some things moving slowly. And of course, there is a difference between the part of the world where you are. If it's in Europe, everybody thinks about regulation. If it's the US, everybody thinks about business. So anyway, so the AI world being so diverse, we are just in the beginning of the journey. So we are still in what the sort of the gurus would call the transformation period. And then after the transformation period will come the adoption period. And I would say that indeed there are really two groups of people now, two groups of, I would say, audiences. And I think the first group, as you said, who is scared, who is skeptical about this technology change gamer, is just looking at the challenges or the issues. And the second group that is embracing this technology game changer is looking at the opportunity. So it's like in life in general, there are people who are seeing an opportunity in every issue, or there are some people who seeing an issue in every opportunity. So there will be two groups of people during some time because we are in this transformation period. And when I was presenting at LocWorld recently, I had a slide on what I consider today as the model of operations for the next, let's say, 6 months. I don't go further than that because you never know what can happen after 6 months. But it was on my slide, I wanted to show that today we have an operational model, which is, as I said, based on file transaction. So the usual technology, TMS, CAT tool, and file transaction.
Yep.
But at the same time, on my slide, I was saying that it was not, this one or the other one. It was this one and the other one, because the other one being, the AI workflow, the AI powered workflow, where everything that is related to content operations is no longer based on files, is no longer based on it's based on data services, it's based on content services, which you don't need when you work in the previous model. And these two models are going to live together for a while. In I would say certainly in large organizations, because large organizations are big machines, and you don't change things very easily in multinationals. I know what I'm talking about here, and so maybe for a startup the choice will be easier because a startup can adopt immediately, the AI powered operational model. But this during this transition there will be two models living side by side, I would say. But at some point, just like you said, there will be a choice to make. And and it's for me, it's impossible to tell you when, but I know that at some point one model will prevail. My guess is, of course, that the AI powered model will prevail because there are so many opportunities, there are so many benefits of using the AI powered model for operations. Then decision makers, so the people who are signing the contracts, who are spending the money, they will go for that model because they will see all the benefits in terms of technology, and they will see all the benefits in terms of people management. So that will drive their decision, and that will also drive the I would say the prevailing model.
The agenda. So I just for, this is what my next point is, probably that will take us to another full 1 hour episode together, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. For suppliers in our industry, I guess the struggle right now in that whole 100,000 foot level kind of thinking toward where we sit in technology is balancing revenue generation. So I am going to adopt technology that's kind of cut into my revenue. And I have no choice because sometimes my customers are asking me for it, right? So this is the general thinking where people are, or should I continue pushing that back for the sake of retaining some of my old revenue? Now, I know the wisdom says technology is coming, regardless of what we say we are doing or not doing. We're not being the one who is gatekeeping it anymore. The genie's out of the bottle. Customers know about it. Everybody knows about it. It's available to people for free. We either get on board or don't get on board, right? So that's the question. And the wisdom would say, if you're ahead of the game, if you are the one as a supplier educating, helping, supporting, and promoting, then you're not the one who's going to be following this, and you won't be viewed as you just catching up now. So what's your view on balancing revenue between, we're not the only one, by the way, for the audience. We're not the only industry that struggled with this. The printing industry went through this. Telecom went through this. Everybody went through this. So hanging on to revenue versus creating new revenue streams.
Yeah, that is definitely a very, very sensitive, part of the decision-making process. And I would say that it depends. It really depends on if you're a supplier, if you are an LSP. It depends on the type of customer that you might have. Because, again, I would say that in many life science companies today, life science being a fairly conservative industry, you can still actually say that, you don't have to sort of be super driven by technology, because, you just need to make sure that you can use the technology that you have to secure a revenue, because your client is not going to be very demanding. Your client is going to keep asking for PDF, translated PDF for the next year. For instance, I'm exaggerating, but it's just to make my point that some clients are not going to push for, some clients are not going to create challenges in terms of choice between technology and revenue. Mm-hmm. However, there are some other types of clients that are going to be shaking, I should say, suppliers, because they will pose a challenge to the suppliers and say, either you keep working with me, so we keep our business going, which means that your revenues are secured if you are able to fit in my tech ecosystem. And if you are not able, then me, the buyer, the client, I have a problem if you say that you cannot fit in my ecosystem because my technology is going to be more advanced than yours, then, your business is at risk. So your revenue. And I think that I have a client now, which I'm not going to name, but it's a fairly big organization. And they ask their suppliers, their language services suppliers, to, as part of their RFPs, very interesting, not just to talk about quality and, the processes, everything that you find, of course, in RFPs, but now they include in their RFPs the capabilities and the capacity for their suppliers to fit in their ecosystem, because that client, the client of mine, but that organization has a very, I would say, not very, fairly sophisticated ecosystem. So it's not just a pile of different tools and systems. It is well organized in an ecosystem, and this ecosystem is really driving the whole content operations of this organization. So it means that they want suppliers, or they want partners, better than suppliers, they want partners that can really be in this ecosystem and not just deliver files with an FTP or deliver files with a TMS. They want to actually access this ecosystem and work in this ecosystem.
And you know what? You bring a very good point, Bruno. I'm sorry, we're running out of time here, but you really bring a very good point, because what you just described, being part of that ecosystem for the customer, is what is the biggest hopes and desires for every business person, to be in that position to connect with customers. Because the last thing you want to be, and that's the fault of them since 30 years ago when this industry got really starting to flourish, is we started as a professional organization like any other professional industry, and then we started commoditizing ourselves to a transactional models, right? Exactly. And now back to the being part of that ecosystem. And if you are part of that ecosystem as a supplier, that means you are now a sticky solution inside of a customer organization versus, you're just a transactional model now. I need you today, but I don't need you tomorrow. If you're part of that ecosystem, you're creating a great evolution from a business perspective, because you want to become an extension to that company. You want to become an extension to that department. You want to be a reliable partner, all that good stuff, right?
No, exactly. And that's where the challenge is for a number of suppliers, I would say. Now that I'm advising and I'm consulting with some buyers, that, of course, they should put that in their RFPs to be able to understand the capacity and the capabilities to fit in the right ecosystem. But of course, it poses a challenge to mid-size or smaller LSPs or translation agencies that are still relying on their good old TMS or the good old FTP system to deliver files, which is really scary for some clients. They say, whoa, if one of my suppliers is like that, he's not. First of all, it's not going to be, to your point, it's not going to be embedded in the ecosystem. But even worse than that, because my supplier will not fit in my ecosystem, it will create some cost on my side, me. So it's even worse.
Absolutely. Hey, Bruno, look, I just want to summarize to our audience here a couple of points here, because we brought up some gems in our conversation today, and I hope people took notes of that. And just in summary, if you're a supplier talking to a customer, please make sure you're solving a business problem. If you are a supplier also hoping to do business with a customer of any of your customer base, let's hope that you are aiming to become part of their ecosystem. And if you are also a supplier wants to do with a business with a customer, make sure that you're up to speed on all the tech and how does that fit in the customer's platform and the customer's models. And if you are a customer who wants to do business with a supplier, look for those suppliers who are solving your problem. It's vice versa. So I really appreciate your time today with me, Bruno. I personally, I have a pleasure talking to you on these topics, and I look forward to having more conversations together. And I hope the audience got a lot of gems out of this conversation, because I did. And I think we've covered a lot of important topics. And each one of those topics, really, you could dedicate another hour to go through them one by one, especially on the datafication point that you just brought up today.
Oh, yeah.
Data, and the idea of static data versus live data. You brought up the Nielsen example. That's pretty interesting when your days at Nielsen, where you have business intelligence data and how to use actionable data in an artificial intelligence way. Those are very, very important points to drill down deeper into them. So last words for you. And I really want to thank you, but last words for you.
Thank you very much, Robin. And thanks again for this opportunity for me to express some of these views and share with you and some of these points. I hope I didn't shock anybody, but I just wanted to be constructive most of all. And you're right. I think there are a number of very hot topics that the industry, or even larger, the community, localization community, should be considering very seriously. And of course, fear is part of human nature, skepticism as well. But I think that we have to force ourselves, and not just us in this industry, but in any industry, to embrace change, because change is not going to wait for us. So thanks again.
No. Thank you, Bruno, for joining me this morning. And thanks in this afternoon in Brussels. Thank you very much for coming online and spending the time with us. I really appreciate it. For our audience, thank you so much for listening into another episode. I really appreciate it. If you are not a subscriber yet, I highly encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels and look us up on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts. And I really appreciate the audience time to listen in on this conversation. And thanks so much, and enjoy the weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Localization Fireside Chat. Take the warmth of knowledge and renewed cultural passion with you. Keep exploring, stay curious, and until next time, this is Robin Ayoub. Keep those global conversations alive.